Hey Cloud Gamers, so today I'm going to have a look at Stadia and forcing 4K and 1440p resolution versus the standard 1920 by 1080 in Chrome. So is it worth it? On the left here we've got the 1920 by 1080 version, in the middle the 1440 and on the right the forced 4K. So looking as we move around here, you can see that the 1920 by 1080 definitely looks worse. But between the 1440 and the 4K, it's very tight. But if we look at the figures from the monitor, the jitter buffer and the FPS from the 1440 does seem to be better overall, and actually when we're looking at these freeze frames, I do feel that the 1440 actually looks a bit better. As we're moving around here in the Division 2, we do seem to see a little bit higher latency on the 1440 and 4K versions, but for the graphics increase it does seem to be worth it. As we come through here and look at the tunnel and look at the last section out the back, you can see that the jitter buffer here, which is the kind of frames that can be dropped, does seem to be a little bit higher, and the 4K does seem a lot less stable. But looking at the truck here, the 1440 version does seem to be a bit clearer overall, and you can see that the 1920 by 1080 does suffer. Moving over to Doom Eternal then, once again we can see that difference on the 1920 by 1080 version, but moving around it doesn't seem like a lot of difference between any of them. As we freeze here and look at the sword, again the 1440 version does seem to come out on top again. I'm not quite sure why that the 1440 looks better than the 4K, but I think this must be to do with the way the compression is working and is being shown on the 1920 by 1080 screen. So it does seem to be worth forcing the 1440. Now we have the option over 4K. 4K does seem to be a little bit overkill now, and we do seem to get some more of those compression artifacts. Though on the Chromecast Ultra, I'm sure the 4K will look a lot better on the 4K TV. So looking at some of the explosions here, in the 4K and the 1440 do look a lot better than the 1920. Moving over to Zombie Army 4 Dead War, one of the newer titles to hit Stadia. Once again we can see on the freeze frame here that the 1440 does seem to be a little bit better. If you look at the water quality as well as the detail on the bricks here, the 1440 does seem to come out on top again. And with the balance of the latency and the jitter buffer, then the 1440 does seem to be a little bit better. As we look at the undead shark, 1920 by 1080 does show that lack of detail and the blurriness on the floor here. So again, it does seem to be worth forcing at least the 1440 version, which will of course use a lot less bandwidth than the 4K version. So I'll leave it up to you to decide. I'm going to finish off with 30 seconds of each of the different versions here, so you can have a look at the actual gameplay and the frames per second. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button for all of the latest from Cloud Gaming Extreme. We try to compare all of the platforms so you can find the right one for you. See you next time.